Okay, we are live streaming,
Perfect.
and I am promoting two people to panelists.
Hey there, Brian. Good morning, Justin.
Hey, good morning.
How is it on the east side over there?
Oh man, it's getting cold. It's trying to be winter. Uh, no real snowflakes yet, but it's trying.
It's coming. It's coming.
I'm so used to Teams, I'm familiarizing myself with the controls. Get my
Yeah.
volume
Yeah.
turned up here. All right.
Robert, can you hear me?
Yep. Can hear you
Okay,
good. Can you hear us?
perfect. Yes, I hear you and I see you. I don't know if you see me.
Yep. Yep. We see you. You got
Okay.
a view of the PowerPoint up?
Yes.
Perfect. Good morning, Laurel.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lynn. Hey there, Brady.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yep. Hear you
Okay,
good.
perfect. Sorry, I forgot didn't have Zoom installed.
No worries. We'll give it a few more minutes here. A couple more participants still waiting on. Then we'll get started.
Hey, Robert, I've got some
Yeah.
really low volume. Could you talk really quick, like a test? I was trying to
Yeah.
get my computer up, but I can barely hear things. I know you weren't
Yeah, for
talking, but
sure.
when you did,
Yeah, for sure. Uh, Hope everything's going well over there on the east side.
oh man, it's pretty low. I think you said going well on the east side.
Yep, yeah, that is what I said. But
All
uh,
right. Well, if you see me this close to the camera, it's because I'm trying to hear. I think I can survive and adapt.
okay, sounds good.
Weird.
Yeah, I know. Under the mute button on your bottom left of your screen, you should be able to choose your speaker as well as your audio settings. There's like a up arrow next to it that hopefully can help. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry I'm a few minutes late.
No worries. Alrighty, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. There may be one other participant that might jump in, but I'm gonna start off with a little bit of housekeeping anyways. There are a couple participants that we had planned on being able to have, but with the federal government shutdown, they're not currently at their jobs, and so we'll adjust as needed. We're going to focus mostly on some background information, how RAC works and stuff like that today, and we'll try not to get into the actual draft rules, which reminds me, we'll also be sending out a new doodle poll for the second RAC to you guys at a later time. We're going to try to delay out so we can get those other two participants in times that they can meet as well. So we're going to shoot for a later time, probably early December for that second RAC meeting. Also want to mention that we are live streaming this initial RAC meeting on YouTube on our director's office YouTube channel. So those panelists that aren't able to attend currently will be able to watch this RAC meeting prior to starting the second RAC meeting. So we will go ahead and jump in. So my name is Robert Ellison. I am a policy advisor with the Oregon State Parks and Recreation Department. We are starting our Rule Advisory Committee, the first one for drone regulations in Oregon State Parks. We'll go over some different stuff today. The agenda is here, so it's changed a little bit, but we're going to do introductions with the panelists we do have. We'll talk about what a Rule Advisory Committee is and what their role is in OPRD rulemaking, a timeline of the process for the drone rules, as well as the background information, kind of how we got to where we are currently. We'll go over some questions, whether it's questions about the process or questions about drones in and of themselves. And then we'll talk a little bit about OPRD's role in managing user conflict as a whole, not necessarily specifically related to drones, and then how OPRD does enforcement as well. So that's a little bit about how today will look. Like I said, we're probably won't dive into the draft rules today, so the meeting may end up being a little bit shorter than scheduled. So y'all will have a little bit of extra time. So we'll go ahead and get started with introductions. Here's the list of people who we had originally planned on being on this panel. And like I said, a couple people are missing out of this. So we'll go ahead and we'll just go down the list. So if you want to unmute yourself and then give us your name and your position and maybe tell us what your experience level is with drones as a whole. Kenji, you want to get started?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kenji Sugihara. I'm the director of the Oregon Department of Aviation. Have been in this role for about 2.5 years, and I consider myself a nationally recognized expert on drones, having been in the industry as well as work with the National Association of State Aviation Officials as their emerging aeronautics chair, and one of the leads on what is called the Advanced Air Mobility Multi-State Collaborative. So I've been around for a while. I know everybody on this RAC, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody. So good to see everybody.
Thank you, Kenji. Laurel?
Good morning, everybody. Laurel Hillman, Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, Ocean Shore Resource Coordinator. I've been involved in drones as it relates to our drone rules and policies since we started working on them, and I can't remember when that was, a while ago. So that's my context is in helping to protect ocean shore resources as part of this rulemaking.
Thank you, Laurel. Justin?
Hey, Justin Paulson, Park Manager with OPRD, specifically at the Blue Mountain Management Unit on the east side of the state, including parks like Immigrant Springs, Catherine Creek, and Hat Rock State Parks. And actually not a ton of drone experience, which maybe is good because I have zero biases. So yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thanks, Justin. Brady?
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Brady Callahan from Oregon State Parks, and I'm the geospatial team lead for the agency, as well as the agency's internal UAS coordinator. I've been a Part 107 pilot since Part 107 came out, nearly 10 years, and have experience with unmanned aerial systems going back almost 15, almost 20 years.
Thank you, Brady. Lynn?
Hi, I'm Lene. I am the Industry
Lynn.
Communications Manager for the Oregon Coast Visitors Association. I think my colleague Erica Sears has maybe been involved in this committee in the past, so this is my kind of my introduction to it. But a big part of my role is doing our stewardship messaging and communications. So that's kind of my context coming into the drone conversation. And looking forward to hearing all your perspectives.
Awesome. Thanks, Lene. Joe?
Hey everybody, my name is Joe Liebezeit. I'm the statewide conservation director for Bird Alliance of Oregon. Been working on the drone issues for several years. I was part of the preceding this RAC. There was the work group that developed the criteria to define where recreational drones would be permitted. And so we wrapped up that process a year or two ago. And so now I'm here back to be part of the RAC. My background is originally trained as a scientist, so well aware of all the impacts that recreational drones can have on wildlife. And more recently, my job has shifted more towards the policy end. But yeah, that's me. And thank you for putting this RAC together, Robert, and looking forward to the discussions ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. Kim McCarroll is one of our other participants who isn't here yet today. She will be representing Oregon Equestrian Trails and has been involved in the previous work groups and RACs as well. Dawn Harris is from United States Fish and Wildlife, one of our RAC participants who is currently not at her job with the federal government shutdown. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Brian Richardson. I'm probably the only non-governmental employee here. By day, I am a financial crimes investigator for a large global bank. So if you see me glancing away periodically, this meeting is happening in the middle of my workday. My side gig, I've been flying drones recreationally for probably 12 years. 3 years ago, I got my Part 107 operator's license or certification. Started my own little company, Revelation Drone Services, which now operates in the Pacific Northwest and also the Southwest, as I am a snowbird. Heading out to Arizona here in a couple of weeks, where it's much nicer than Oregon weather this time of year. And I appreciate the invite. I'm an avid user of the Oregon State Parks. I have flown my drone in a few of them, and I look forward to contributing as well as learning in this experience.
Thank you, Brian. All right, Chris Painter would have been our next panelist, again, a member of the Federal Aviation Administration. He is a enforcement personnel within the FAA, so he was going to give us a little bit of insight into the Federal Aviation Administration's role on drone enforcement. Hopefully he'll be able to join us whenever we have our second RAC meeting. My name is Robert Ellison. I am a policy advisor with Oregon State Parks. I have been with Oregon State Parks for going on 8 years. I spent the first 5 years of my career as a park ranger across the state at, 2 different regions, 3 districts, and 4 different parks. So I've got a little bit of experience kind of around the state with Oregon State Parks, and now stepping into this policy advisor role. Katie?
Hi, Katie Gauthier, Government Relations for OPRD, and I'm here to support Robert in the behind the scenes for this RAC and have been working on drone issues for a few years as well. So I'm glad that Robert is taking the helm and gonna guide us through this process.
All righty. So we'll go ahead and jump into what is a RAC. So on the screen there, you should see a little bit of information about the purpose of a RAC. So Rule Advisory Committee is convened by OPRD to provide input on any administrative rule work that we might be doing before formal public comment. So this is kind of this group that is built out of members who we identify are interest groups. So that can include recreation groups, partner agencies, local governments, a variety of different members that we see as kind of the subject matter experts or maybe affected by the rules that we're working on. The function of the RAC is really to help us review draft rule language and discuss any possible impacts that the drone rules or any rules might have. Throughout the RAC, we will look at the entirety of the draft rules that we're proposing and see if there's any sort of recommendations that might improve those rules from a lot of different perspectives. So, like I said, this is an advisory role. It is a step in the process of OPRD reviewing administrative rulemaking. And so we will take the feedback from this RAC and combine it with the feedback from public commenting, as well as any internal staff feedback. And then that will be presented to the Oregon State Parks and Recreation Commission. And they are the deciding body of whether a draft rule will be adopted as they are, adopted with changes, or not adopted. And so we're kind of in that step right before official filing with the Secretary of State's office and then opening a formal public comment period. Any questions on RAC? Is that kind of what you all expected going into this? Perfect. All right, we'll keep moving forward here. So this is the timeline. So we currently are in this outreach phase, and we have went through this before. So you'll see in a little bit here, we have more of the background information of how we got here. But for our scope here today, I'm going to jump into the timeline. So we really started this research and development following a Senate bill back in 2022. And in that time, we've worked with partners, tribes, DOJ, and staff to do this draft rule language. The outreach portion, which is what we're in right now with this Rule Advisory Committee, really has ran from June to December, pulling in, this one is a little nuanced because the rulemaking has been paused for some period of time. So Commission originally approved opening of the rulemaking back in 2021. We gathered early feedback and planned communication around this RAC, as well as with our internal partners. And then we're now convening this Rule Advisory Committee. The Rule Advisory Committee will likely be 2 meetings, as you all know, and we'll be scheduling the second one for early December. The public comment period, we're looking to run from January 1 through probably mid-February-ish. And the proposed draft rules that we have will be what the public is able to comment on. Comments are posted weekly on that rulemaking page, and then we will also have a public hearing as well. After our public comment period, we will jump into the agency review. So we'll gather all the feedback from not only the internal work group, but this RAC, as well as any public comment received online or during that public hearing, to analyze comments and revise the rules as needed. DOJ reviews that final draft, and then we go to the commission, and we're looking at presenting to the commission for final decision either in April or June of 2026. Any questions? Go ahead, Joe.
What's the day length? How many days is the public comment period going to be?
we're shooting for probably 45 days. So if we open January 1, probably through mid-February.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Alrighty. So now I'm going to jump a little bit into this background. So this is kind of how we got where we are. So back in 2016, 2017, we had some internal policy on drones within Oregon State Parks. From there, we went to 2018, where we developed a little bit of the visitor policy guiding visitor use. And then DOJ and visitors wanted some specific language around drone use in Oregon State Parks. In 2019, there was the legislative concept, which required legislative authorization for state agencies for rulemaking on drones. And then OPRD developed bill seeking permission at that time. In 2021, there was Senate Bill 109, which put us on notice to begin drone rulemaking. And so that's whenever we really started the initial phase of Oregon Administrative Rule on drone rulemaking. In 2022, we paused that rulemaking because we acknowledged that in that time period, we didn't have enough representation on our RAC to adequately assess how drones were going to impact Oregon State Parks and the impacts on visitors and the wildlife. And so we formed the internal work group, and that work group began to meet and help influence the draft rules and guide a little bit of work around that. The work group continued to meet in 2023 and then got the criteria ready for public feedback in 2023. We took public feedback on that criteria with some example drone mapping, and with that feedback, we went back to a little bit of an agency review to figure out what the best way to implement this drone rules in Oregon State Parks might be. And then the work group concluded with a presentation and recommendations to the OPRD director. So the current rules and authority. So how we currently manage drones within Oregon State Parks is through some of our other OARs, and it's not specific to drones in and of themselves. So we rely on this 736010, where a park manager may limit based on the protection or safety of wildlife or the park or park employees. And then designate a location within a park for single use to avoid conflict with other users. So we rely on a lot of these rules currently to help manage emerging technologies that we can't keep up with within our regular rulemaking process. So we rely on park manager authority, protecting park resources, and visitor behavior currently to manage drones in Oregon State Parks. Any questions on this so far? Perfect. We'll go ahead and jump forward. So this is where we kind of are stuck in that, like finding the balance of not only pursuing OPRD's mission of protecting these recreational resources as well as the parks themselves, but also providing enjoyment of recreational use of unmanned aircraft systems. So we're really trying to acknowledge that we are a recreation agency and we want to promote recreation, but we also have our responsibility of protecting the parks and the resources. The drone work group. So the goal was to create a clear framework that balances the diverse recreation interest while also, again, protecting the resources and public safety. So this work group worked on draft rules, but also worked on drone mapping. There was a large plan that acknowledged that some parts of Oregon State Parks may be appropriate for drone use, while other parts were never going to be appropriate for drone use just because of the impact on wildlife and or the already strong visitation in a certain area. So the work group reviewed all of that. Here were the members of that internal work group. Again, some of you are very familiar with this work group and helped us develop a lot of the criteria for drone use in Oregon State Parks. We had representatives from the Portland Audubon, which is now Bird Alliance of Oregon, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, coastal residents, Oregon equestrian trail users, and we all kind of work together to create that criteria, which you'll see here shortly. So this was the classification criteria that work group really came up with. There were green, yellow, and red zones. Red zones were going to be prohibited always. So some of those areas that we identified as overnight campgrounds, areas that were adjacent to or close to federally or state protected areas, areas that proposed risks to other users just because the amount of visitation. There were also conditional areas. And so some of those areas maybe relied on seasonality. So one of the things that we look at pretty frequently within OPRD is our snowy plover management on the Oregon coast. And we recognize that is seasonal. So whenever the snowy plovers aren't in their nesting season, it might be appropriate to have drones in certain areas where other times it might not be. We also recognize that parks are busier seasonally. So in the summer, some parks might not be appropriate for drone use just because the sheer amount of visitation. But then come middle of December, it might be a lot slower, not as many people visiting, and so it could be appropriate. And then open areas. And so these were areas that none of the other conditions were met, and it would provide good opportunities for drone recreation, and we can mitigate the effects of that drone recreation. So this was the criteria initially worked on with that drone work group. So you can see here's a little bit more information on some of those yellow and red areas. I'm going to give you guys a second to look at that, but it's all stuff that we've kind of touched on. Another thing that we pointed out as red areas there is that just didn't have recreational access. We want to make sure that people weren't trampling on vegetation or other sensitive areas trying to get to places that they wanted to be able to fly their drone. So making sure that people were staying on trail and in areas that were appropriate for visitation. This leads us to adaptive management. And so we recognize that adaptive management is really what it's going to take to be able to appropriately manage these emerging technologies. And so any drone takeoff and landing areas will be managed as living documents. We want to work with stakeholders, and it's going to be a continual collaboration effort. We recognize that some parks over the years will get busier or will slow down on visitation just based off different things that affect OPRD's visitation. So like during COVID, we recognize there was a large increase in visitation in parks that maybe weren't visited as much. And so we have to have that ability to flex our management of some of these emerging technologies. So, and then also just as resources change and visitation changes and the technology changes, we want to be able to adjust and make sure it's appropriate for the use that we're currently seeing in Oregon State Parks. And then we'll also provide a way for continual access to provide feedback on specified areas for drone users, as well as people who are maybe seeing negative impacts from drone use. And so it's just something that we will continually look at and try to make the best judgments going forward. Any questions here? Nope. All righty. So, like I said, this was going to be kind of a quick background. Does anyone have any questions overall on anything we've talked about so far today?
Nope.
Okay. So go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I remember after the work group met, the intention from Parks was to develop maps that delineated all the red, yellow, and green zones for the state parks and the ocean shore areas that OPRD manages. Can you, I think we discussed by phone a while ago that didn't happen. Can you kind of talk about like why that didn't happen and any repercussions on how that might influence our RAC discussions?
Yeah, great question. And I think Brady probably has some good information on that, on where we got with the mapping and such. So Brady, do you want to give us a quick update on kind of where we were with the mapping, how far we got, and where we paused?
Sure. So internally, what we did was to take the guidance that came out of the work group and focus on developing a couple pilot projects, essentially look at several parks and implement those guidance documents to see what the result would look like, and then share that information actually out with the public for comment. And we went through a little bit of difficulty internally, kind of figuring out exactly the best mechanism to develop the maps, but finally settled on sort of an iterative process with the internal various stakeholder groups who kind of understand the different types of conditional requirements that those laid out, and found that it was going to be a very long process to develop those for all of our 350 plus pieces of property. So I think after the public comment came back, which Robert, you actually might have more information on what the results were of the public comment than I do. That was part of the point where we elected to pause kind of the implementation of all the mapping effort and maybe redirect on how we were going to do the implementation.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Brady, with that public comment, what we saw with a lot of that public comment was people really wanted to know, based off the draft rules, they wanted to see complete maps of where we were going to allow drones, where we weren't going to allow drones. And with the large lift of doing the GIS mapping with very, very intricate detail on each park property of where drones may or may not be allowed, we recognized that that was going to take a long time. So for the public to get what they were requesting in the public comment on our public feedback period was going to take a long time and wasn't going to be very effective. So that's where we kind of landed today, where we recognize that GIS mapping that is very intricate and detailed, a lot of visitors, myself included, has a hard time locating themselves on a map in general. And so being able to identify where they're at and flying for some may be really, really easy. I know, with DJI drones and some other drones, there's the specific map whenever you're flying, you can see exactly where you are. But with some of the smaller, more recreational drone use that maybe isn't even for camera, maybe it's just for flying the drone, it might be hard for visitors to geolocate themselves and identify whether they're 10 feet this way, are they in a fly zone? If they're 15 feet this way, are they not? And so coming up with a simpler mapping system that identifies areas based off boundaries and is more blocky than super intricate GIS mapping was going to be more appropriate, as well as simplifying the rules to really allow for that adaptive management where we can kind of quickly adjust as needed. I know whenever I was working at Silver Falls State Park, we had a raptor that had decided to take nest under the South Falls waterfall. And so in situations like that where wildlife kind of just makes decisions of where they're going to go, and we want to do our best to protect them. And so being able to adaptively manage those maps more quickly and effectively was going to be a priority. So that's kind of where we ended up with the initial mapping and kind of how we're going forward, trying to identify areas that are going to be appropriate that we can also change as needed.
Okay, so just to follow up, so then the rules should include some information about how that new model of simplifying the maps should play out. Like that, there should be clarity in the rules that we are working on. And I haven't looked at the draft rules yet, so I have to acknowledge that. But is that going to be part of the goal? Like because I mean, I understand that people have a hard time, knowing where they are not on a map, but like at the same time, you're going to need to have a map of like where drones are allowed and where they're not, it seems to some degree. And it's fine if it's more simplified, but just want to get a sense of how detailed the RAC will need to be about that.
Yeah, so that's where we really lean on that adaptive management, right? And so the way the draft rules are written, it does say that OPRD will have mapping on the OPRD website of where drones are and are not allowed within 30 days in advance of any drone area being um, approved as a drone takeoff area or drone operation area, I should say. And so the draft rules lean towards more adaptive management on the OPRD side, where we don't have to go back to rulemaking to try to change any of those areas or reclassify any of those areas. But we still are being really forthcoming about where those areas are going to be in advance before any of them opens up as a drone operation area.
Okay, thank you for the
Yeah.
clarifications. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments or something that any of you would want to bring up that we haven't talked about yet, or things that you want to see going forward, or maybe conversation points for the RAC number 2? No? Perfect. So next I'm going to jump into what is OPRD's role in user conflict as a whole, as well as how OPRD does enforcement. And so, Justin, I might put you on the spot here in a little bit to help kind of guide this conversation as you see it from park manager's perspective. But OPRD on a day-to-day basis manages a wide range of recreation types. And so on any given day, we have user conflict that might come up, whether it's between an equestrian user and a person with their dog out in the park, or a trail runner and a mountain bike rider. There's going to be user conflict that pops up really frequently, and we, as OPRD, take a education first approach. We want to make sure to help visitors understand the expectations, the safety, and respectful recreation, trying to manage those conflicts with the rules that we have. And then whenever issues arise, use staff communication, outreach, and adaptive management to reduce those conflicts before they escalate farther. And so one thing that we have been working on, and my team has been working on over the last couple of years, is we've had a rules outreach campaign. So we utilize our social media to be able to share rule information out to the public before they get to the park. So that way they don't show up with the expectation of being able to do one thing or another that is going to cause conflict with other recreational users at that park. And so we recognize that some parks are going to be better for a certain type of recreation and not as good for others. And so it's just constantly trying to manage that user conflict at each one of our park properties. Whenever that user conflict approach fails, we do have our tools for enforcement, and so we rely on those when they're needed. Our park staff are trained. They go through what is called POST, which is our professional officer safety training, and we're progressively work through those enforcement tools, but we really try to thoughtfully think through that and see what's going to work the best in any given situation based off the safety, fairness, and consistency across the state. And so those officers in the field have a little bit of officer discretion on any time that they make contact with any user. And we recognize that sometimes it's not about breaking rules, but just managing that conflict, because both people might be within their rights, within the rules. So the goal is just to support positive visitor experience, where we all want to be outdoors. We all love the outdoors. And I think that's why we're all even part of this RAC group, is we recognize that we want to preserve and protect the outdoors while still being able to have good, positive experience and recreation. And so do you want to jump in there, Justin? Do you have anything to add on top of that?
I think you covered it great, but yeah, in general, OPRD is education first. It's not like instant citations, so thoughtfully and progressively, like you perfectly said. For me, it would be starting with a conversation, and then if, all right, this is the person's second time violating a rule, you might go to a compliance request. And then there's citations and orders to leave, which are basically evictions. And then the highest level of an enforcement tool is an exclusion, where it would be at a minimum of 30 days from said park property. And so those are places that, rangers don't want to go. We were trained with our words enough to handle those type of things. So just managing the conflicts, giving good options, like you may not be able to fly at Hasita Head, but you can go down the coast, or so that's always going to be an approach. It's not going to be hard hammers, at least in my opinion, and OPRD culture wise, it's just not the approach. So you covered it perfect. So.
So, Laurel, do you have any addition to that on maybe like what you see on the coast managing user conflict there?
I haven't thought about that in the context of what you're asking
No
on the
worries.
fly. I think that that's something we should talk about as you may develop these rules to make sure that they, are protecting resources while allowing those recreational opportunities in other places. So,
Awesome.
yeah, I think this group is well set up to get there.
Perfect. Alrighty. Well, that's what I had planned for today within the conversation on context, especially given some of our RAC members that were not able to participate. We'll shoot for next time. We'll have Chris Painter, our member from the FAA, talk a little bit about what their role in drone enforcement is, because we recognize that drones in the air are outside of our scope of authority and is managed by the FAA. And so we'll go into that, and then we'll dive into the draft rules next time as well, and really kind of go line by line and take feedback and comments on what we currently have written and any areas that you see may need additional considerations or clarifications. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, Robert. Since we don't know when the federal agencies will be back online, is there any possibility of having alternates that would have the same experience as I think the Fish and Wildlife and then the FAA person, that could be kind of substituting for those people if they're not there? I just wanted to throw that out there because feels like the RAC is not quite full with that expertise. So wanted to get your thought on that. If you had any other alternates already, kind of as you went through the recruiting process, if you had any alternates lined up already.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that if we get to that point, hoping for the best going forward. But if we do get to that point, if you have any suggestions that you'd like to share to be able to help fill those roles, that would be great. I mean, I'm already looking at trying to find another alternate for RAC number 2 because the Oregon Ocean Shores Conservation Coalition has had a little bit of a change of priority, and so they were last minute unable to attend this RAC. So looking at some other options for some natural resource folks to be able to pop on as well. So we can definitely look at that. Kenji,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Sure. Joe, I can cover the FAA side if necessary. So I got that side pretty well under control. But yeah, just having Chris here would be helpful.
Sounds good, Kenji.
Awesome.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, I'll open it up one more time if anyone else has anything to add, but otherwise we'll hold off on the draft rules review themselves until we can make sure we have a complete RAC. I don't want to push forward just for the sake of pushing forward and end up kind of back where we were, where the RAC didn't have enough participation from the folks that we wanted to be able to participate. So any additional comments, concerns, considerations for the good of the order?
No, this is great. Thanks for pulling us all together again. It's been a while. I think, did we start, Joe, didn't we start this around 3 years ago? I'm thinking, I think it was around 3 years ago, wasn't it?
Sounds about right, according to
Yeah,
Robert's timeline that he showed, and it reminded me bringing back some of those memories. So I think you're right, Kenji.
yeah, because I remember those initial conversations way back when. So, nah, but it's good to get back together with everybody. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kenji. And I guess we'll go ahead and call it there. Thank you all for attending today, and look forward to that second doodle poll coming into your email inbox. We'll reschedule, or not reschedule, but find some time in early December for that second RAC, and hopefully be able to pull together a larger audience to make sure we have good conversation around those draft rules. So have a great rest of your day, everyone. And if any questions or concerns come up before then, just shoot me an email.